You're listening to CoachingCues podcast, where experts all around the world answer your most burning questions surrounding the wide topic of strength training. Every week we tackle the what, the why, and the how of one specific topic in just 15 minutes. Straight to the point, no fluff. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this week's episode.
Hi there, guys. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Jeremy Pearson, and I am currently a second-year Ph.D. student at the University of Kansas, working in both the Gallagher Applied Physiology Lab, as well as the Rosa-Molinar Microscopy and Analytical Imaging Core Laboratory. I have been a retired competitive bodybuilder for many years now, and I just recently published my master's project with the help of my awesome co-authors, my lab mates, and my mentor, Dr. Eduardo de Souza. And what we did, we investigated the effects of repetition tempo on muscle hypertrophy and strength in resistance-trained young men. So today, what I'm going to be talking to you guys about is what is training tempo, or as I kind of referred to it already as rep tempo or repetition tempo, and how you guys should utilize it in your training when your goal is to gain muscle strength or muscle size. So with that being said, let's kind of dive right into it. What is training tempo? What is rep tempo? Well, it is the time in seconds of the concentric, the isometrics, and the eccentric muscle actions that you're under tension from a barbell or a dumbbell machine, really any gym apparatus. And just to kind of review or to go back to what are concentrics, what are isometrics, eccentrics, what are those muscle actions again? So we know that starting with concentrics, we know that I tend to think of it as you're kind of typically you're fighting gravity. So concentrics, you're going against gravity. The muscle is coming closer. It's contracting. It's coming from insertion to origin. It's coming closer together. Again, working against gravity. And then eccentrics, so eccentric muscle actions, that is the opposite. So we're going with gravity. The muscle insertion, the origin is going away from each other. The muscle is lengthening. And then right in the middle, so isometrics, we know that that is when the muscle is under tension, however, the length is not changing. All right, so now that we have that, back to rep tempo. So traditionally, you'll see repetition tempo displayed in a 4-digit numerical sequence. So for instance, let's take a leg extension, for example. And I'm going to prescribe a repetition tempo of 1-0-3-0. The 1 meaning I'm going to push against the pad and I'll extend my leg. So that's the concentric phase. The 0s are the isometrics, so we're not pausing. And then the 3 seconds is the descent or the eccentric part of, or the lowering of the pad. All right, so with our example, I hop onto a leg extension machine and I begin the set. So I extend my leg, go through 1 second of the concentric phase. I don't stop at the top, and I immediately begin the descent or the 3-second eccentric phase. And again, I don't stop at the bottom, and I continue to do another rep and another rep until the remainder of the set is complete with the same repetition tempo. So the repetition tempo that I prescribed, that example I gave, it's just an example. There are many, many different ways that you can manipulate someone's rep tempo. For instance, I could elongate the eccentric part of a repetition. I could add isometric holds to part of the rep. I could shorten the concentric phase of the rep. And honestly, I could do the opposite of what I just said. So there's very, very many different ways that researchers, practitioners, guys in the gym, bodybuilders, they can manipulate tempo. So when we look at the literature, it's really not. There are many different types of prescribed tempos. However, the literature really categorizes the literature into, or the rep tempo literature into either slow or fast tempo. Now, and that's kind of what I'm going to distinguish on today and kind of talk on the differences from slow to fast and its effects on muscle strength and muscle hypertrophy. So talking slow versus fast. Slow, we're going to say anywhere from 2 seconds all the way out to, I've seen a research study on 16-second reps, which sounds tough. It was like an 8-second eccentric, 8-second concentric. Sounds crazy, but someone's done it. And then, so for fast, we would say anywhere from 2 seconds or less. And sometimes in the literature, you'll see it described as subjects were instructed to train as fast as possible. So now that we have kind of the slow versus fast debate going, how does it look on the effects of muscle strength and size? So when we look at the literature, it really doesn't seem to show any difference for muscle strength or size, regardless of how I train. So if I train slow, I train fast, there really doesn't seem to show any significant difference for muscle strength or muscle size. However, the majority of these studies are conducted in untrained individuals. And why does that matter? Why does it matter if they're untrained? Well, we know from previous literature, a lot of previous literature, that untrained individuals respond really well to any novel stimulus. So whatever you give them, they're probably going to gain muscle or gain strength. As my professor, Dr. DeSouza, always says, is that untrained individuals, they sneeze and grow. So it's important to point that out because our study actually looked at trained individuals. It was there's maybe 3 out there now. There's not a lot of data on trained individuals. So for our study, we had these well-trained guys come into the lab, and on average, they were able to squat twice their body weight. So these were pretty strong dudes. So each subject came into the lab, and each subject had both legs randomized for either a slow tempo or a fast tempo leg. Now the slow tempo was prescribed 1-0-3-0, and the fast tempo leg was prescribed 1-0-1-0. So the guys came to the lab twice a week for 8 weeks and performed unilateral leg extensions to failure for every set. And on average, each session for the first couple of weeks was 3 sets, and then the last couple of weeks was 4 sets. Importantly for our study, we wanted to minimize or mitigate any confounding variables. So we made sure to equate or match, if you will, for the total reps and sets that they completed and the weight that was lifted. So we equated for volume load. So whatever the slow leg did, whatever the fast leg did, it was completely matched for the same number of reps, the same number of sets, and the same weight that was lifted. Okay, so after 8 weeks, we took a look at their muscle strength. So we did a unilateral 1 rep max for leg extension. We looked at their muscle thickness or muscle hypertrophy, if you will, via ultrasound at 40 and 60% femur length. So we looked at kind of the proximal and distal part of their leg. And then we also looked at rate of perceived exertion, which if you're not familiar with, basically how I like to describe it is after each subject's set of slow or fast tempo, I would ask them, hey, on a 1 to 10 scale, how hard was that set? So how hard on a 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest set, I couldn't do another rep, extremely, extremely exhausting. And then 1 being just a walk in the park. So what did we find? And then that was called, we kind of refer to that as RPE. So what did we find for our results? What were our primary results or findings? So for strength, we found really nothing too spontaneous or too crazy. We found that their strength levels went up very similar for each leg, regardless of the tempo. So the tempo didn't really matter. Both legs increased muscular strength. However, for muscle thickness or muscle hypertrophy, it was a different story. It was a little weird what we found. So for the proximal part of their leg, the 40% of femur length, we found that there was no differences for muscle growth. And that's kind of a unique finding right there, because if you ask any of the guys in the gym, any of the bodybuilders, they're going to say, oh, well, you should train slow because it's more time under tension. It's more metabolic stress. You should definitely be training slow. Well, we didn't find that. We found no differences between the legs for proximal, for slow or fast. No differences. For 60%, so the distal part of the quads, which we know are more targeted for leg extensions, they're more targeted when you're during a leg extension set. We found that muscle thickness actually increased to a greater extent in the fast tempo leg. So we found the complete opposite. So the fast tempo leg, or the fast tempo, augmented the muscle thickness to a greater degree than the slow leg, which is completely against what the bodybuilders or the gym bros would say. So we don't know how to explain these findings, but I think it's kind of one of the primary findings I would mention is that maybe we should kind of break away from this zeitgeist or this common belief that we need to train slow for muscle growth. And then lastly, for rate of perceived exertion, we found a significant difference that slow tempo was much harder and much more exhausting than the fast tempo leg. So one comment I want to make for that I didn't get to make in my paper is that perhaps you guys should work smarter, not harder. So whatever you're doing in the gym that's making it harder, doing isometric holds, doing all this stuff to make your life harder, make the muscle work harder, is not necessarily translating to greater muscle growth. Okay, so now I want to talk to you guys about my practical recommendations for you guys when you're in the gym and you're training for muscular strength or muscle hypertrophy, and you want to optimize your rep tempo, or you want to manipulate your repetition tempo. So starting with muscular strength, it's kind of inferred that we're going to be needing to lift heavy weight. We need to kind of lift at a higher intensity. And since we're lifting with heavier weights, we really need to control the repetition tempo. We need to control the reps. And that's kind of my key word for if we're lifting for muscular strength and we want to optimize, or we want to control for we want to control for rep tempo, we need to make sure that we're training with control. So especially with the eccentric part of the phase, we really need to control for that descent so we don't hurt ourselves. So relatively speaking, it's going to be slower tempo. But really what I want to say by that is it's controlled. So, but relative, it's going to look slow. So for instance, if let's say we're maxing out on a 1 rep max squat. I get under the bar, I take 2 steps back, I begin my descent, and I'm controlling it all the way down. I hit my end range of motion. Now we're on the concentric phase. Now I can kind of go as hard as I can or move as fast as possible. I do that, but again, we're lifting with such heavy weight that the bar or the machine or whatever is not moving as fast as if you were with 60% of your 1 rep max. So again, relatively, when we're training for muscular strength, your rep tempo is probably going to be slowish compared to if you're lifting with lighter weight. Because of that, we just need to be controlled, because if we do a fast eccentric, if we do just a fast eccentric, that could potentially lead to injury. And it just, if anyone's done a 1 rep max, there's no way you're doing a fast eccentric and then sticking that and then coming up from that. You're going to get hurt. So one comment I want to make to if you're training for muscular strength and we're manipulating tempo, is fatigue is not our friend. So fatigue and muscular strength do not go well together. We do not want fatigue if we're training for muscular strength. And what we found in our study and other studies previously is that RPE was much higher in slow tempo. So although we're controlling and we're slowing down the reps, make sure you're not going too slow. So you kind of have to find a balance. Overall, I want to say that you guys kind of have to find a balance with how you're training. Make sure your reps are controlled, but you're not going too slow and you're not going too fast to potentially cause an injury. So too slow where you're causing a lot of fatigue, too fast where you're potentially causing an injury. So you need to basically find that balance. Now for muscular hypertrophy, this is where we can voluntarily manipulate the tempo to an easier degree. So training for muscular strength, again, we're training with heavier loads. It's kind of involuntary that our rep tempo is going to be kind of slower. We can't really manipulate that because we're lifting with such heavy weight. But for muscle hypertrophy, we can voluntarily manipulate the rep tempo to an easier degree. And when we look at the data, if we looked at what has been found in trained individuals with slow versus fast rep tempo on muscle hypertrophy, there really isn't a clear indication of, oh, slower is better, oh, faster is better. Thus, what I would recommend, and my practical recommendation for you guys is to vary or combine your repetition tempos when you're in the gym and you're training. So train fast, train slow. I'll take that even further and train how you prefer, train how you are desiring to train. So if you like training with slower eccentrics and faster concentrics, absolutely do that. You can do the opposite. I would definitely vary it though. And how that could look, it could be varied from exercise to exercise, because we know from exercise to exercise, the range of motion requirements are way different. So for instance, the leg extension that I keep bringing up, that I'm traveling maybe 90 degrees, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. How about a lat pull down? I'm training almost double that. So if I manipulate the tempo, the eccentric portion or the concentric portion for like a faster or slower, that could be way different how I manipulate that for different exercises which require way less range of motion. And additionally, individual biomechanics come into play. So for instance, if I have someone that's 6'3" and they have long femurs versus someone that's 5 foot and short femurs, and I prescribe a tempo of, let's say 1-0, or let's just say we're prescribing a 5-second eccentric portion of the squat. That might be great for the tall guy that's going to travel and it's going to be a smooth descent. But for the short person, he might already be at the end range of motion within 2 to 3 seconds. So that's going to vary from exercise to exercise, from individual heterogeneous biomechanics, and then just really overall what I want to say for muscle hypertrophy is make sure you're varying, make sure you're training how you want to train, because it really doesn't seem like there is a better or the best rep tempo for muscle hypertrophy. We haven't found that yet. We don't really know what that is. So for muscle hypertrophy, my word of caution for that is fatigue may not be, it's not as, I guess I would say, critical for strength, but I would say that we don't want to cause so much fatigue for muscle hypertrophy that it's affecting how much weight we're lifting or how much reps and sets we're lifting. So to kind of go further with that, if I'm doing slow, just really, really slow tempo throughout my sets, and I'm just getting really mentally and physically fatigued, and it's affecting my next set and it's affecting the weight for my next set, that's probably an indication you're going too slow and you're causing too much fatigue. So one meta-analysis from Schoenfeld found that and this isn't untrained, but I think it does still relatively apply to trained individuals, so Schoenfeld found that for eccentric muscle actions going 8 seconds or above that, they found negative chronic muscular adaptations for going over 8 seconds. So I would recommend keeping it way below or way less than 8 seconds. Don't go longer than 8 seconds for your eccentric repetitions. So it's basically causing too much fatigue. So lastly, what I kind of just want to overall say, for if we're lifting for muscular strength, just make sure we're limiting fatigue and we're controlling the reps. For muscle hypertrophy, train how you want. So if you like training slow, if you like training fast, train how you would like to train. All right, well, I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, if you want to just talk science with me, feel free to reach out, send me a message on Instagram at Jeremy R. Pearson. You guys can also check my ResearchGate account out. Just Google my name and ResearchGate, and you can see all the previous projects I've been a part of. My rep tempo paper is on there for you guys all to read. You can also see my ongoing projects that I'm working on at Kansas right now. So lastly, I just want to thank my lab and give a shout out to my lab, University of Tampa, and my mentor, Dr. Eduardo de Souza, again, for the incredible mentorship and just friendship over the years, and just the ability to carry out this study and just be with those guys in the lab. It's just been a good ride. So with that, I will leave you guys, and I hope to hear from you soon. And good luck training in the gym. Love it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to CoachingCues podcast. If you would like your question to be answered by an expert, please head to coachingcues.org/ask. See you next week.